Somewhere in the acute angle of the infinite circle of existence, where time is as much a theory as it is a rule, sits the infinite Alexandrium, a library so vast it makes IKEA look like the load-bearing atom on an Allen key. Its shelves stretch into infinity, filled with books that range from how to summon a demon for beginners, to 101 recipes for counting to 101, to War and Peace, or the original WAP. Thank you very much, Mrs. The Stallion, if Dr. Stallion is indeed your husband. The air smells like old paper, new paper, things that aren't paper and never could be, existential dread, and a hint of fresh Davidoff cool water from the fire prevention systems that no one can find. The Alexandrium is alive and conscious, which sounds cool until you realize the implications of sentience for an infinite object. It has the knowledge of multiple universes at its shelf tips and the impulse control skills of a toddler on a sugar rush. Staircases lead to nowhere, doors open into walls, and the Dewey Decimal System has gone supernova. Oh, and the orbs that light the place? They're moody if you haven't fed them a banana or read them a Terry Pratchett book. Some of them will just flicker insults at you in Morse code or binary. Others will suddenly dive bomb you like a magpie in nest protection frenzy. With a sound that's equal parts thunderclap and dramatic mic drop, a book opens. Out pour shadows, not bland, oh no, it's dark shadows, but the kind with long fingers, the kind that feel like they've been binge-watching horror movies and taking notes. One clawed shadow hand reaches out to the shelf and fondles a leather-bound tome. Another reaches back to scratch its own spine, on which we read embossed in gold the words, Realms Unknown! Welcome to Realms Unknown, a podcast brought to you by the Bugle, the card catalogue of truth and justice, in whose hallowed stacks we will see microfiched discussions about science fiction, fantasy, books, movies, games, and more. Each week I, Alice, a published author, and Fraser will reach into the archived sections of our cultural histories and withstand the dust of ages to bring you about half an hour of chat about all the escapism you've ever desired. As for who will be strapping on their library card and joining us on this week's literary quest, it's the Watson to my Holmes, the orangutan to my unseen university, the Matilda to my Miss Honey, the Dewey to my Melvin, the Dr. Abigail Chase to my Nick Cage in National Treasure. It's the brilliant Tom Neenan. Welcome.
Hello! Thank you so much for having me. Because this is, it seems to be a library-themed episode, I've decided to wear glasses this episode. Do I wear them the rest of the time? Yes, but they mean more this time, and I think that's important.
I am at the point in my glasses wearing journey where I decide in the morning if I'm going to wear the glasses, and then I wear them all day or not all day. So I can live a fuzzy life, or I can choose to live a clear-sighted life where my 1-year-old son is constantly trying to steal my glasses and eat them.
Of course.
Those are the options.
What makes that decision for you?
Whether I need to read the number on a bus at any point in the day.
Yeah.
But a reminder for all our listeners to subscribe to the Bugle channel, and remember that all of the subjects we cover here will be listed in our show notes. So if we talk about a book or a show or a game that you are interested in, have a look in the show notes and we will be able to serve it up to you. But that brings us to our news section. Highlights on the speculative fiction world this week is a massive controversy as ever in the Harry Potter world, with Paapa Essiedu being cast as Snape. Cross race-blind casting of Snape. Obviously, a lot of people are very upset by this, not just because they're very upset by the constant, continuing presence and dominance of Harry Potter in the mainstream if they don't like Harry Potter or the author of Harry Potter. Also because Snape is very clearly a metaphor for some sort of blood purist / Nazi situation. So casting a black man in the role sort of confuses the issue very slightly or a lot, depending on how confused you are. Tom, do you have a position on this?
Yep, I'm wading in. I'm going in 2-footed on this one. Why not? Okay. It's a very strange thing, isn't it? So we're gonna kind of set aside Harry Potter, the origins, the author, that kind of thing for now. Let's just park that, because that feels like it's a whole other episode. That's a side special that you're gonna have to do at some point about sort of, separating art from artist. I think what I've seen recently, I follow a channel on TikTok, which is a woman talking about can a TV show or film, can they write black characters? And it's really interesting as sort of, someone I consider myself a creative, sort of, ask these questions. And they were recently covering Severance and how the character of Milchick in Severance has sort of been given another dimension, given some of the things which have happened in series 2 of Severance with regard to sort of his race and his role within Lumen, and how actually it's a really smart way of at first just having a character and then showing you're not sure because of the way that Severance works whether race plays a role in the world of Severance, and actually series 2 and Revelations in series 2 show it clearly does, and it shows it in this very interesting and very Severance-y way, which is offbeat and quite unnerving.
Which is offbeat and unnerving, and a beautiful satire on the ways in which corporations incorporate
Exactly.
racial awareness and affirmative action in ways that are just buttering their own bread and
Yes.
are deeply sort of unsettling and disconcerting if you think about the implications and the way that they're doing it very cynically.
Yes.
Without denying the emotional resonance. I'm trying to avoid spoilers here. Without
Me too.
denying
Yeah,
the
big sort
emotional
of.
resonance for the character of what they're doing
Yeah.
for him, but also it's
Mhm.
so cynical and gross and disgusting and clearly insincere on their part, which
Yes.
doesn't mean it
Yeah.
doesn't have an impact for him. And
Mhm.
we're not sure how much he's aware of how cynical it is from them, whether
Yeah.
he's a true believer or not.
Exactly. And very well done, because I don't want to sort of go into too specifics because it's a brilliant scene. Seek it out if you haven't seen it. But this is just me talking as well as like a viewer rather than anything else. But it does then mean that Harry Potter, I think, to do any character justice, needs to decide whether it's going to do the Severance thing, which is say, no, race exists. The racial dynamics that exist in our world also exist in the world of, for instance, Severance. And Harry Potter needs to decide to what extent, is this character just, is it colorblind casting and it's just Snape and he's going to be basically Alan Rickman but played by a different actor or whatever? Or are they going to actually try and give this character more dimensions, given that I think that each series is going to last like 10 episodes, so we can get a lot more of it, and you'd hope more dimensionality to each character. They're going to need to decide whether Snape being played by a black man is going to play a part in his, is going to be relevant to his character. And I'd hope that if you've got a brilliant actor like Paapa Essiedu, that they would make it relevant. And then you've got to go through the entire Harry Potter universe and go, okay, this is a universe in which the racial dynamics that exist in our world also exist here, or slightly differently, something slightly different, and then see how that informs the character. I don't envy that job of the writers, because I'm
Well,
not sure. Mm,
particularly as the premise of Harry Potter, as far as I remember it, and I haven't read it since I was a teenager,
mm,
and even then I didn't read all of the books. But
mm,
the idea is that you have a world in which the
mm.
wizarding world, there isn't racial tension along color lines. There
Yes.
are racial tensions along wizarding pureness of blood, and so that it doesn't really matter what color your skin is, it matters what your ancestors were in regards to magic ownership.
Yes.
So you can have somebody, but then of course Snape in the book is a half-blood along those
Mhm.
lines, so he's racially impure according to the Harry Potter internal
Mm.
wizarding world, but then also the wizarding world does cross over into the real world, so you cannot
Yeah.
imagine people who are entering the wizarding world
Mhm.
being completely cut off from their own history. They're
Yes.
11 when they enter Hogwarts if they are mudbloods or of mudblood heritage. So they will be
Mm.
carrying some of that awareness. And is that erased by the presence of wizarding magic, or like what have we got here? Is
Mm.
there can Snape brew up a potion that makes you unconscious of racial biases? Um, but Paapa Essiedu will do a great job of the performance. The question is what that
100%.
performance will be and what it will say. We've gone too deep, I feel, for
Gone
a
to
snappy news
yeah.
question, but it feels like there is so much here.
Also, I forget, sorry, because I'm not a huge Harry Potter scholar, but once you've joined Hogwarts, do you then never interact with the real world again? Like, do you not just like go shopping on Oxford Street or something like, but just don't use any wizarding powers?
Well, the kids go back to their homes for the holidays at the
Yeah.
very least. And then I presume you have
Mhm.
the choice at graduation whether you want to work in the real work in the magical world.
Yeah.
Uh, I know that I don't know that the sequels and the Cursed Child and stuff
Mm,
might have some more to say, but I assume that if you could be a wizard operating the real world, which would
mm.
feel like cheating to some degree, but
Yes.
magic apparently does work in the real world, but you are obliged to sort of conceal it from muggles.
I believe we've entered what is sort of known, which I'm referring to as the Cars dilemma, which is kids love this world. Like in the Disney Pixar film Cars, kids love it and they absolutely want to imbibe all of it. And as an adult, you tend to watch Cars and go, okay, but the second you scratch the surface of logic, it doesn't bear any scrutiny, does it? It doesn't like. There's a meme about how there's a Pope mobile car, and that indicates that there is a Catholic Church. But that also indicates that because there's a Pope mobile, someone tried to assassinate the head of the Catholic Church in the Cars universe. It's basically, I'm not sure. I think with the Harry Potter series, the films are incredible. They managed to get out without anyone sort of going, hang on, that bit of logic and that bit of logic don't work. And the fact that they're going back and going, now we're going to do it in even more detail, I think is going to cause some trouble down the road, I believe.
Yes. Well, I mean, the question of whether there are characters in Bluey taking their dogs for a walk.
Yeah.
It's the
Exactly.
infinite recursion of
Yes.
which animals are granted sentience in worlds in which animals are people,
Yep.
and which animals are forever stripped of humanity
Mhm.
by the metaphor. But to return to casting controversies or
Ooh.
non-controversies in this instance, it is instead of hiring lots of actors, Bong Joon-ho has hired only one actor multiple times, Mickey 17, in which he cast Robert Pattinson, whose post-Twilight filmography seems to have delighted everybody, including Robert Pattinson skeptics. He's just
Mhm.
deliberately chosen the absolute weirdest stuff in a way that makes you feel very relatable to him, despite the fact that he's clearly a very weird guy, or maybe because of the fact that he's a very weird guy. Apparently, he invited one of his stalkers to lunch and just complained at her about his job until she ran away.
He's hard not to like, isn't he? He's got that Daniel Radcliffe to take us, we're never far away from it in terms of, he made probably quite a lot of money doing his franchise film, and now he's using his fame and the fact that he doesn't really need to turn much of a profit to do really exciting, interesting stuff. I'm seeing Mickey 17 tomorrow. That's why it isn't my thing I want to discuss on this episode, and I'm very excited because it's a confluence of great directing and writing talent and acting talent. I'm very excited.
Well, it seems incredible to me that Warner Brothers has invested in Mickey 17, which was never ever really going to make money. They allowed
Hmm.
him to spend how much was it? 100 something $1 million in making it. With it's a very high
Right.
effects film, having one character play multiple things. It cost $118 million on production and
Wow.
another $80 million on marketing.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is sort of, again, a deliberately weird film, a deliberately alienating film, a deliberately sci-fi film.
Yeah.
It's so exciting to me that studios are spending money on stuff that can't be appealing to everybody. I'm 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 wondering, these people don't make those kind of decisions. They only make money decisions. I'm wondering what they think the outcome is. Is this like a purchasing of legitimacy situation? Is it keeping a Bong Joon-ho on side? Has Robert Pattinson traded one of these for one of those?
Yeah.
Said, will you let me do something really weird, and in exchange I'll do Baywatch 4 or whatever. I don't know what the logic is. It delights me that this is the outcome.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's because it is. I mean, it's not a hot take to say that yes, Hollywood is driven by money, and whenever something is, whenever someone says up front, look, this might not make us money, but it might do well elsewhere. You sort of go, well, why? What's behind it? It's not even you wouldn't think it's even an awards contender because it's coming out in March, which is sort of post the Oscars, so it'll be forgotten about by next year's Oscars. So it's not even like they're kind of trying to use it for that. It's just like a really interesting, weird choice that sort of I can't wait for, and I don't know why they've done it. And I consider myself someone who's always a bit like cynical, or someone who's always willing to go, oh, I get it, yeah. It's so they can get this director and they can line them up to do this thing. But no, they've just got someone who's completely earned their right to make the kind of films they want to make and let them do it. And that's so rare and so
That's great.
refreshing.
It could be a tax thing, could be a tax write-off
Yeah.
thing that they need to make a loss, but instead of making something dreadful to make a loss, they've pivoted in the non-Craven direction. I
Yeah.
mean that in a number of ways, but it's,
It's fair. I like that. That was a very good pun.
maybe they think it's gonna be a cult classic.
Hmm.
That's the most cynical read I have on it. But that brings us to our ads section. Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't buy. Most of life is in fact one form or other of judging a book by its cover. We make informed guesses based on the surface of things, from the outside of a sandwich to the expression on the face of the man walking towards us with a knife. Murderer or chef, we think quickly, looking for context cues. And that brings us to reading a book by its cover. You can figure out where to put a book by looking at its cover. Shelve the forbidden grimoire next to the self-help section and see what happens and how confident it is. Look at ghostwriting for real live ghosts and the dreaded parallax laxatives, stories from a new point of poo. Decide where you're going to put these books based purely on their covers and never look inside. And this episode of the podcast is brought to you by Schrodinger's Cataclysm, a grittily rebooted quantum multiverse Marvel spin-off of the original Schrodinger's Cat series. Instead of a box with an increasingly likely to be dead cat, you find one of an infinite number of increasingly unlikely scenarios through a portal. Just listen to some of our satisfied customers. All I wanted was a probably dead cat, and now I'm stuck in a new Earth timeline where cats evolved to rule the world. You don't want to know how the apes turned out. There's quite a lot of murder here, but no social media. 5 stars. Balderdash, I demand a refund. I opened the box and discovered that I'm now an 1897 version of myself, and my butler keeps trying to collapse my waveform. Also, it turns out that while men are in charge these days, we also have to support a family of 8 and a mistress who can't read, and we're never allowed to cry. All we eat is steak and kidney pies, and there's no indoor plumbing. 1 star. Upon opening the box, I transcended my mortal form and became one with all quantum possibilities. I am now half a glass of water. I exist in a state of pure awareness, experiencing all lifetimes simultaneously. Also, I have inexplicably developed an allergy to string theory. 3 stars. That brings us to our What Have You Been Into Recently, Tom Neenan section. What have you been into recently, Tom Neenan?
Hello, thank you. So it was International Women's Day recently. Am I correct in saying that? I think so.
Yes, I forgot to post about it on International Women's Day because I was too busy dealing with the transport, finance, and emotional logistics of being an international woman. Around how to not get home. For those of you who don't know, there was a cyclone headed directly towards my home in Australia just about when I was due to fly home to Australia with my family. So I had to put off my flights and scrabble around and find accommodation in London. And it turns out that that's quite tiring.
Yes, being an international woman is not easy.
It's not easy.
So I decided I wanted to watch something which was a film by a female director that's a low-budget genre film that I hadn't seen before. And then I thought, oh, I'm doing this show with someone called Alice who likes romance. So I watched Timestalker, which is Alice Lowe's film, which she wrote and directed, which has it's sort of, I would say it's unclear whether it has like a sci-fi element. I think it's very clearly has a sci-fi element, but it does it never provides any concrete answers to the phenomena that we're seeing. But basically, sort of the idea is that she is a woman who is stalking a man through time, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it slightly keeps you at arm's length, but I didn't hate that because visually it's really fun and it's very funny and it's got that kind of offbeat sense of humor that Alice Lowe is really famous for. So yeah, don't go in expecting answers or like too many kind of a resolution. What it is kind of a meditation on the cyclical nature of the search of love and also the sort of the bondage in which women find themselves in sort of throughout history and how that basically has a way of like recreating itself in various ways. You know, it's simple things like, so it's various different lives that this woman lives where she's searching for this man, and usually it results in her death trying to save this man or succeeding in saving this man's life. But you know, it's small things like she plays a restoration woman, and she has the huge wig. But then we see her in 1980, and she's got the hairsprayed perm in the hairnet while she's sleeping, and it's sort of how all of these things just echo through time, going back and never really change. They just sort of alter the shape in which this oppression and this the expectations of women kind of are shaped. And I really enjoyed it. I know some people, I think maybe because it doesn't offer that many sort of concrete answers, were a bit put off by it, but I really enjoyed it. I think that search out the work of Alice Lowe. Also reminded me of the work of another female director called Anna Biller, who made The Love Witch recently, and another film which I can't remember the name of. I'm so sorry, but they both like a really visually driven directors as well as very funny writers. And I would say search those out if you want something that's a bit different and a bit interesting.
Wonderful. I will actually. That sounds
Mm.
really fun. I got into George Louis Borges' short story, The Library of Babel, which
Mm.
is an infinite library, or the universe is an infinite collection of books with random letter combinations. And the narrator in this short story spends his life searching for meaning and order
Hmm.
amidst the chaos. His role is it's sort of a purgatorial space. It's very fascinating. It's sort of slightly dislocating, and that is what brought me to this week's subgenre submarine, which is going to be fantasy and sci-fi books set in or largely featuring metaphysically loaded libraries that fold into infinite space. The idea of the library as somehow deeper or wider than reality. Of course, we can start with Terry Pratchett's Unseen University Library, manned by the orangutan. You have the library at Mount Char, which is somewhat more of a horror sci-fi, in which there's time travel. The library exists. There's without spoiling it, there's an apocalypse, and these children are recruited, and by sort of a sinister character. The relationships between the children are very like loaded and tormented. It's a really good but quite dark book, The Library at Mount Char.
Hmm.
There are funnier and lighter ones. As I said, the Unseen University Library. Jasper Ford's Thursday Next series has a great library that gives you books that then allow you to enter into this liminal space in which characters step into and out of the pages. There are obviously, so many fantastical library metaphysical books. What are your recommendations for this, Tom?
I'm not sure if this counts. I'm sorry, I don't want to immediately break the rules for you. Obviously, I always have to bring everything back to Doctor Who because that is my want. And A Silence in the Library and the Forest of the Dead is a great two-parter, even though it's actually disappointingly analog in terms of the library is a library. It features books which are paper. But as you unravel it, you start to find out that actually there is metaphysical elements to this library as well, and that there is the option of hopping in and out of various sort of existences within that library. So if you haven't seen that, it surprised me if your listeners haven't, but Silence in the Library and the Forest of the Dead, I think, has to be. Also, it's a library the size of a planet, and who doesn't want to go and visit a library the size of a planet?
That sounds like a lot of fun. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
recommend The Book That Wouldn't Burn
Ooh.
by Mark Lawrence, who I mentioned before in the grimdark section. So
Yes.
again, this is quite a dark recommendation. So I think maybe if you start to think too deeply, it's quite a funny and light satirical idea
Yeah.
when people gloss over it. But if you start to think too deeply about the implications of an infinite library, or a library that kind of goes orthogonal to time and space and gives you workarounds, then it kind of becomes quite sinister. The Book That Wouldn't Burn it's the story of a boy who exists inside and has been born and grown up inside this library, and he's part of a people who
Mm-hmm.
are sort of have enemies. And you find out about, most of them have a lot of trauma. Their families were killed by these enemies or eaten by these enemies, or these enemies come from outside the city. And eventually you start to realize that the enemies have similar stories, and that
Ooh.
maybe, and with this is kind of a spoilery section, but that maybe these roles of enemy and hero race are interchangeable over time. Maybe the ownership of the library and the city versus the living outside the walls might be things that change over time. And that's really fun. And again, quite dark. If you know
Hmm.
Mark Lawrence, he's also very funny. So he leavens the darkness with quite a lot of light that I think makes it palatable for me, somebody who's always a little bit conflicted about reading a grim, dark thing, mostly because it means I have to finish the book when I start it. Because I can't, it leaves me with sort of an unsettled feeling if I put it down in the midst of something. So if I'm signing up for something upsetting, I need to go all the way through to its conclusion.
That makes sense.
Another recommendation that I have for this subgenre deep dive, which is
Hmm.
metaphysical libraries, and what they allow you to do is Hollowpox, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend, which is the library, and that is a copy of the city they live in its own alternate universe. So each subject is a separate street with areas, and there's also
Hmm.
bookworms that are real, and the librarians fight them. Very fun. Semi-conscious libraries, delightful. Also in the Golden Enclaves, which I've recommended before, by Naomi Novik. The library there will offer you books
Hmm.
that you need or want, but you have to kind of control your own desire for the book in order to draw it to you. So the
Ah.
library will make your life harder or easier depending on how much service you do for the library or for the school. Um, and you have to hold on to a book. If you get a book, you have to hold on to it and look after it really well. And if you don't look after it, it'll slip off while you're not looking.
Hmm.
So if it's like an important spell book, you've got to like engage with it. So there's a lot of fun to be had in the infinite library space. Of course, that is just scraping the surface. There are so many multi-dimensional libraries. It's a really delightful conceit to play into, where reality bends around the shelves, because I think we've all had that experience in a library of feeling like there's so much knowledge there, it can't not affect the fabric of space and time.
I think I do find the whenever libraries are an amazing setting for any for sci-fi elements, like you say, because it's got that kind of portal element where every single book is transportational. But I do find them I find them so scary purely because, like you say, the weight of knowledge and the fact that no one will be able to intake all of these books in their lifetime, and they just feel so overwhelming. And so I think I'll always find library's terrifying for that reason as well.
If you want more recommendations for this subgenre submarine, you can have a look over on my social media, where I asked people for recommendations in the metaphysical library space and got a really good one by Adrian Tchaikovsky, whose books I adore.
Mm.
Uh, he has a library section in Service Model, which is Adrian Tchaikovsky's book Service Model, which is an homage to Borges. Borges? How
Mm.
do you pronounce that? That's a thing I've only ever seen written down,
Yeah.
which is the short story that set off this whole subgenre deep dive for me. So also the librarian Snow Crash, bringing it back to cyberpunk, the librarian in Snow Crash, which is a sort of a sentient um, computer with a personality.
Oh wow.
Lots of fun. Your ad section now, because you can't be what you can't imagine. Are you tired of running out of time? Check out our borrowed time collection. Extend deadlines, redo past mistakes, or pause reality for a coffee break. Just return all borrowed moments on time. Late fees include premature aging or existential unraveling. Library not responsible for paradox loops, lost futures, or unintended deja vu.
Need someone in a vest and artistically rendered oil smeared across their glistening biceps? Then use Grunt Recruiter.
Yes.
Grunts can be used for any type of high risk, low pay science fiction work. From clearing out the ruins of a colony, the residents of which all disappeared suddenly 2 months ago, to firing enormous pulse rifles at hordes of bug like aliens, to attaching a large bit of machinery to another bit of machinery despite the fact that everything is now done digitally. Grunt Recruiter has you covered. Every grunt comes with their own accessories: a half chewed stogie, a bandana tied around their forehead or upper arm, a toothpick, and the all important bullying sense of humour designed to make higher ranking employees feel nervous around them and out of their depth. Your grunt will keep you humble with degrading bon mots like, "I didn't know it was bring your bitch to work day," or "Nice suits, do they make it in adult sizes?" Or the classic, "just making you jump for no reason." Grunt Recruiter. We don't get paid enough for this shit, and neither do they.
That is an amazing ad. Unfortunately, fortunately, you know that exists now for real. You have an
What's that one?
armed escort Uber app. Uh, you've got a grunt share service that's now available in America, where on an app you can get an armed escort to come to wherever you are right now. They seem to be marketing it to men who want to impress women,
Yeah.
because nothing impresses the woman that you're on a date with
Hmm.
more than bringing 10 more competent men immediately to the date.
But presumably those men aren't like, they can't legally like murder someone who tries to attack you, right? They just that they would still be that would still be an extrajudicial killing. Or that, do they just have guns, or are they just big men and that's all? They just sort of their presence is an implied threat.
I think their presence is an implied threat,
Oh,
and
okay.
then ideally, then you can just say things that are going to cause other people to attack you, and then the grunts will defend you. Look, I don't know. This is not for me. This is not.
Fair enough.
I feel it's not a thing that I ought to understand. If I understood
Yes.
it, I would think less of myself.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
But it's definitely a crossover from science fiction into reality. The idea that you can just order a bunch of bodyguards online. You don't have to
Yeah.
cultivate a loving bodyguard relationship like Whitney Houston.
Yes, that is my theory, that all billionaires think that they all have this idea that society is going to break down instantly. And that's because they've never really experienced someone doing a job for them out of like altruism. It's all transactional for them. So like, if you've ever gone to the NHS and a nurse has gone, I'll help you, they don't have that. They have like, I'll go to my doctor who I pay to make sure I'm well. And they're like, yeah, when society breaks down, those people are not going to be loyal to you. That's not going to help you.
Apparently, there is genuine conversation in Silicon Valley, presumably in that slightly wanting to shock each other kind of way, about
Mm.
whether you would shoot the helicopter pilot that takes you to your post-apocalyptic crash pad in New Zealand, because now they know where you live.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, then the helicopter pilot is now going to try and shoot you, and you're just going to get lots of helicopters parked in New South Wales with 2 dead people in them.
That brings us to our trope on a rope this week. Tom Neenan, do you have a trope on a rope that you've been enjoying or had a little too much of?
I do indeed. So there's 2 phrases that have come up a lot. I've been watching a few different sort of bits of genre television and film, and there's 2 phrases which have jumped out. I don't know if a phrase is a trope, probably not, but
It can be. I think it can be, if it's tropic.
I think it is. So the first one is that, and it really makes me, I have like a visceral reaction to it. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. Is the phrase "full bellies." Full bellies is usually like it's a type of writing where, you know, whether it's sci-fi or whether it's fantasy, people tend to talk in this kind of unspecified medieval sort of way of communicating, which is always a bit highfalutin. And they will talk about whenever someone wants to look back on prosperous times, when, you know, things were plentiful long before the fall of the dark time, they will refer to how they, you know, I remember that night and all the children had full bellies. I think Thanos even uses the phrase full bellies because, you know, once he's eradicated half the universe, there'll be plentiful resources for everyone and there'll be full bellies. And it makes me feel so sick. It makes me feel so horrible. But it comes up again and again and again. I hear this phrase. And I think it appears in Game of Thrones as well, which is them, you know, them talking about the nights we had, you know, sort of with the flowing wine and the boar and things like that. And it's just, yeah, it is just this idea that obviously when things are scarce, suddenly you reminisce at a time when, oh, we had so much and we had full bellies. And I always think, does no one in any kind of genre literature have any idea of like moderation or pacing themselves? Why are they always full bellies? The other one as well, but for me goes on that same sort of tropey thing, is the phrase "the air was like honey." People, whenever that's another time when you remember like a romanticized idea about how things were in the past at some point, and someone will talk about the
if
air.
you've ever been anywhere with 80% humidity, you would not just have the idea of the air being like honey.
Exactly, the
We were
horrible.
so sweaty.
Yeah.
Oh, what a sticky time it was.
Yeah. And it's meant to be sort of evocative of this, I don't know, like a balmy summer's night where you just sort of, you know, you lost track of time and it was so, you know, it was gorgeous and the sun seemed to stay in the sky for all night. But both of them just make me feel really sort of sad and nauseous. And they occur a lot in literature. So when I was thinking about my trope on a rope, I was like, right, okay, finally I get to say, please stop using the phrase "full bellies" and "the air was like honey" in your genre literature.
Okay, I will accept that as a critique if you
Mm.
provide a valid alternative that would please your sensibilities.
Oh, okay. So it needs to be slightly poetic. I can't just go like, "We ate loads. It was awesome."
There was adequate nutrition for our
Yeah.
physical needs.
I'm just trying to think now. I mean, like, can't we just use the word satiated, or like, our hunger was sated. We ate until we felt the sleep of the meats, something like that. We slept the sleep of the meats. There you go. That can just be like, oh, I ate so much pork that I had to have a nap. That's basically what that means.
Well, on that note, this was not the trope on a rope that I was going to do, but
Mm.
we never worried about where our next meal was coming from as
Yes.
a description of a time of plenty.
Hmm.
Seems to me sort of upsetting, given that we now all, if you're listening to this podcast, most likely live in a time of plenty.
Hmm.
Particularly for anyone who's above the poverty level.
Mm.
So we do live in a time of plenty, and people are constantly worrying about where their next meal is coming from. Gwyneth Paltrow is just like obsessively sourcing every bean she eats.
Yeah.
Is worrying far too much about where her next meal is coming from, as well as where her last meal is coming from, as well as where the meal she just ate is going to,
Mm.
in terms of getting a squatty potty and so on and so forth. I think like plenty, if anything, makes you more worried about where your
Yeah,
next
yeah,
meal,
yeah.
or at least as worried in a different and much less valid way. So
Yes,
I'll make that
exactly.
my trope on a rope for today.
Nice. Those kind of restaurants that have to tell you sort of the exact farm where the chicken came from, and assure you that it lived a happy life and all those things.
Meet
Just sort of,
Gerald,
yeah.
your trout for today.
Exactly. We're so worried about where all of our food is coming from. In a time of less plenty, you get less picky, and I think that's fine.
Yeah. And that brings us to our floating feature, The Minds of where we think about something that we've enjoyed so much in the past, but maybe makes us feel a little bit when we try to recommend it onwards to somebody else. Tom, have you got something that you're feeling a little ambivalent about today?
I do. So I want to talk about some shows which I really enjoy. These shows shows and films, and they are Iron Man 2. They are Star Trek Discovery. They are also Rick and Morty. Now, and also The Simpsons. Can you tell me what those pieces of media all have in common?
Fans that upset you?
That would be absolutely legitimate. Fair enough. No, sadly, they all feature a cameo from a little-known man with a floating portfolio in the US government, Mr. Elon Musk. Now, I know that this isn't a political podcast, but there was a period where Elon Musk sort of went about buying his way, I assume buying anyway, at least sort of convincing his way into shows that had a bit of credibility with, I guess, sort of young, nerdy guys. Absolutely me, sort of to a T, basically. And so he's in Iron Man 2. He's sort of almost like pitched as sort of an equal to Tony Stark in terms of being a genius philanthropist and all these things. He is name checked alongside Wilbur and Orville Wright in Star Trek Discovery as like the pantheon of geniuses that have survived to into the Star Trek universe. He's obviously in The Simpsons, and Lisa Simpson is done dirty by having a line where she sort of explains that he's a genius. And also he appears in Rick and Morty as well. He is like, so you go through all of these things, and occasionally I think you just, what the young people call a jump scare of remembering that he has sort of permeated culture very briefly in a very brief time and will always be there now. And it's not particularly like these shows have aged badly. It's just that, like, when you, I guess, venerate someone and then they maybe show that they're not the greatest. Like I say, I don't know if this is particularly political podcast. I would go further, deeper on it, but that's not why people listen to this. Anyway, so I just say that occasionally you'll be watching something and have a bit of a jump scare that he has appeared.
Well, it's certainly sort of, if you become conscious of the ways in which somebody has placed themselves in the popular culture quite deliberately,
Mm-hmm.
then you become conscious of how the self myth making has been achieved. The ways in
Yes.
which people became convinced that someone is a genius it can be in part them getting a cameo on something that calls them a genius.
Yes.
It would be super interesting to see the contracts and the deals that went down there between Musk's representatives and whoever was writing the script as to who paid whom, what the limitations were. For example, fascinatingly enough, if you are a movie that's using Apple products in it, and probably getting money from Apple to place those products in the movie, they have a no villains clause. So it's a television series or a movie in which it's like a murder mystery, and you see somebody using an Apple product, they are not the killer. And if you see them using an off-brand non-Apple product, they may well be the villain.
Wow.
Because they have a no villains clause, which I think is fantastic, and I cannot wait for whoever will pay them enough money to have a villain use an Apple product, and everyone who thinks they know that to be fooled. But I don't think people know that generally, but that's quite a fun thing to keep an eye out for if you're invested in horror or in mysteries, crime and thrillers in which there's somebody who might be a bad guy. Just look at what their phone is and you might get a little clue.
I think it does happen a lot more than people think. I think a lot of when somebody agrees to have a to place a product in an existing TV show, I think there'll often be a thing like, this product will be used by the character whom the audience most identifies with. So you're not going to have you're not going to pay a lot of money to have your product in a show and then have the person using it be like the comic loser, the person who no one would ever want to be like, the kind of the punching bag of the episode. So this is turning into the rest of entertainment now, but I'm quite enjoying it. So yeah, like all those contracts, there's a lot more detail, I think, than that people realize that go into creating those.
I think the general rule for your minds of is maybe wait for someone to die to figure out what their legacy is going to be.
Not a bad idea.
Before you cite them approvingly as the example of X, make sure that they don't then buy Twitter and turn it into X.
Yeah. Very true.
And that brings me to what the best thing is right now. What do you recommend for people?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm going to see, is it Mikey or Mickey 17 tomorrow? So I'm very excited about that. I've also just started replaying The Last of Us Part 2, which is very bleak and very sad, but I do think he sort of stands up as an incredible piece of media and entertainment that just will stand the test of time. So those are things that I'm really enjoying at the minute, but I get that a lot of people may not be jumping on board with that. Otherwise, I really enjoy, I think, have I said Lower Decks before on this show? Maybe, but I'm enjoying
I don't know, but that always bears re-mentioning. Lower Decks is the Spaceballs.
The Star Trek universe, exactly. So I'm really enjoying that. What about you, Alice? What are you enjoying?
Well, I think that my recommendation for you going out into the world this week is to find a piece of media that has an infinite library in it, and let me know when you've read it and where you get lost in it, or your most surreal library experience, as well as find out who we can use as a shorthand for a genius.
Yes.
Going forward from now. And why not read an Adrian Tchaikovsky book? Because I'm always thrilled when a real author engages with me on social media and has a little bit of a chit chat, and reminds me that people who write books are also people who read books. Speaking of which, buy my book. It's A Passion for Passion. It's available now on unbound.com, amazon.com, bookshop.org, depending on which level of villain you would like to buy from. Also, you can find me online at patreon.com/Alice Fraser. If you are a writer who likes writing, I run weekly, twice weekly writers meetings, and I've got a writers retreat in Switzerland in September. If you'd like to come along into the Swiss mountains and do something incredibly Swiss and mountainous, we have a really fun time. We go for walks, we do classes, you can just write your thing. We have guest lecturers who come in, and it's just really delightful. Expression of interest form is up at patreon.com/Alice Fraser or at linktree/Alice Fraser. That's linktr.ee/Alice Fraser. Tom, have you got anything to plug?
I will, as ever, encourage people to go to my tomneenanart.bigcartel.com, tomneenanart.bigcartel.com, where I'm currently hawking some sort of genre-based prints, and I'm hoping to do more. And also, please contact me if you would like a commission of anything. I'm sort of opening up commissions for paintings and things like that. So, in the absence of any things that I can talk about writing wise, because they're all still under, sort of under several blankets and behind locked doors, I'd say please contact me if you want anything painted or want to buy any of my prints, because I really enjoy putting those out there.
Please do that. Tom Neenan Art is brilliant. This is a Bugle podcast and Alice Fraser production. Your editor is Ped Hunter. Your executive producer is Chris Skinner. I'm Alice Fraser. Please sign up at my Patreon. There's expanding expenses from having to avoid a cyclone at patreon.com/Alice Fraser. I'll talk to you again next week.